Start recording. So let us discuss about acceleration time graph. All of you know there is a distance time graph. What is the second graph that you know? Velocity time graph. The third type of graph that you should know is acceleration time graph. If you can recall, whenever we say distance or displacement time graph, what is there on the x-axis? Always on the x-axis you have time. And where is the distance or displacement? Displacement is there on the y-axis. And what is the name of this? This is called displacement time graph is what you should remember. So always time is on the x-axis. What is the importance of distance time graph? Obviously, any graph you can take a slope. Obviously, slope is y-axis over x-axis. So, if you take slope of this graph any point of time, what is the slope of it? Slope is y-axis over x-axis. What is there on y-axis? You are having distance. So, distance divided by time. What did we study in our childhood? Distance divided by time. Fatapat bolo beta. Distance divided by time is velocity, is what you should remember. So, displacement time graph. Why do we do this graph? We create this graph so that we can calculate the slope of any point, at any point. For example, first second is over, second is over, third second may, if you want to know at the third second, how fast is the scooter going? Very simple. If you take this graph, third second corresponds to this point. At this point, you take the slope. And the slope is y-axis by x-axis. On the y-axis, how much it traveled? What is the value on the y-axis? For this point. For every point, there are two coordinates. One is y-coordinate, other is x-coordinate. So, the y-coordinate will give you the displacement and the x-coordinate will give you the time. So, if this is 2 seconds, if this is 2 meters, then 2 divided by 2 becomes 1 meter per second become the velocity. So, the most important point you should remember is the whole purpose of displacement time graph is you take this graph, any point if you can calculate the slope, then that slope is y-axis by x-axis and that is distance over time and that gives you the velocity. So, to know the velocity at a given point of time, how will you be able to know it? You have to plot a distance displacement by time graph and in that particular point which is corresponding to that particular second, you can take that and at that point calculate the slope and that gives you the velocity. So, to discover the velocity at any given point of time, what do you create? You create a plot called as displacement time plot is what you should remember. Okay. So, now you should tell me, you're all very intelligent guys. Suppose if this is not distance, if it is velocity, Suppose if it is a velocity, then what will happen to the slope at any given point of time? Velocity by time, y-axis over x-axis is the slope, or the x-axis is the slope. So velocity by time will be equal to acceleration. So the slope of any point of a velocity time graph will give you, bachcho, don't forget, it will give you the acceleration is what you should basically remember. Now the question asked by the examiner is a very simple question. Yeah. The simple question that the examiner is asking is, what is the purpose of acceleration to the time graph? बच्चों, आपको displacement time graph पता चल गया, इसका पर्पस क्या होता है? Slope at any point will give you velocity. Then velocity time graph ka importance, why do we plot velocity on the y-axis and time on the x-axis? Why do we plot velocity time graph? The slope at any point of that graph will give you acceleration. इसके लिए velocity time graph को plot करते हैं. Now the examiner's favorite question in the NEET UG exam is, what is the purpose of acceleration time graph? First of all, you should tell me, how do you plot acceleration time graph? Very simple. Y-axis के ऊपर क्या रहता है acceleration time graph में? Acceleration will be there on the y-axis. And what will be there on the x-axis in acceleration time graph, bachcho? Time will be there on the x-axis. Now let us say you plotted a graph something like this, right? With a uniform velocity, an object is traveling. That is, as the time is passing, acceleration is not increasing, acceleration is not decreasing, acceleration is remaining same level. So when acceleration is uniform, uniform का मतलब क्या है? ना वो बढ़ रहा है, ना वो गिर रहा है. Without falling down, without rising. If an object is traveling uniformly, that is called as uniform acceleration over a period of time, then acceleration time graph will be typically a horizontal line parallel to the x-axis is what you have to remember. Now let us say first second, second second, third second, fourth second. Till fourth second, the object is traveling uniformly. Then after fourth second, the object, fourth के बाद क्या आता है? Fifth आता है, fifth के बाद sixth second, sixth के बाद seventh second, seventh के बाद eighth second, eighth के बाद ninth second. क्योंकि x-axis के पर क्या प्लॉट कर रहे हैं आप? टाइम को प्लॉट कर रहे हैं. इसको कहते हैं acceleration time graph is what we are talking about. Now from 0 second to the fourth second, the object traveled at a uniform acceleration. Then after that, it started decreasing. The acceleration is decreasing. By sixth second, it has come to 0. It has come to 0. Then you take the acceleration values here. 0.5, what is the units of acceleration? 0.5 meters per second square. 1 meter per second square. Then 1.5 meters per second square. and here you have 2 meters per second square. So, first 4 seconds it travelled at a uniform acceleration, and after that acceleration started decreasing, and by 6th second it has become 0. Then either niche आओ how will it be? Acceleration on the negative y-axis, minus 0.5, minus 1.0, right? Then minus 1.5, then minus 2, then minus 2.5, then minus 3. So, this object is travelling such that by 9th second it has reached, typically minus 3. Minus 3 meters per second square was the acceleration, and typically it happened by the time it is 9th second. Now, I want to ask you a question. First 4 seconds it has travelled. Let us say that in the first 4 seconds, this is a rectangle. What is the height of this rectangle? The height of this rectangle is 0.51, 1.52. So 2 meters per second square is the height of this. What is the width of this? The width of this is 0, 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds. So you have 4 seconds here. This height is 2 meters per second square is the height. So what is the area of this? Suppose if I ask you, what is the area of this place? It will become equal to 2 into 4 seconds, that is equal to 8 is the area. So what did we learn in our earlier class? What is the definition of acceleration? Acceleration is the change in the velocity over a period of time. Change in the velocity. That is, there is a final velocity by the time object travelled from this point to this point, because there is a uniform acceleration. So that final velocity minus at this point the object was having certain x amount of velocity, that is the initial velocity, divided by, to reach this final velocity, how much time it took? It took some final time, and this is the initial time. So the change in the time, so delta t. So A is equal to delta V divided by delta t. So delta V then is equal to A into delta t, A into delta t. So where is A? A is on the y-axis. And what is delta t? Delta t is on the x-axis. So what is the area of this rectangle? Then will be equal to, it will be equal to change in the velocity. So the change in the velocity is equal to the area of the acceleration time graph, is what you will understand. So what is the whole purpose of the acceleration time graph? अगर आप acceleration y axis में डाल के time को x axis में डाला और acceleration time graph को depict किया, और you identified an area and you calculated the area, this particular area during this duration of time. So the area of this location, this much space, is A on the y-axis into the delta t, which is equal to the change in the velocity. So the whole purpose of acceleration time graph is to find the change in the velocity. So this is very important statement. Area of acceleration time graph, what is the purpose of it? What will be the options given by the examiner? A, is it to find the initial velocity? B, is it to find the final velocity? Or is it the change in velocity that you want to find over a period of time? What is your answer? It is to find the change in the velocity over a period of time is what you should remember. Now, I'll give you one typical problem. I'm going to rub, I think you have a clear mental picture on all this part of the story. So, बच्चों बोलो फटाफट, how many graphs do you know? Displacement time graph. What is the purpose of plotting displacement time graph? The slope at any point of that graph will give you velocity. Then second, you have a velocity time graph. What is the purpose of it? The slope of it at any point will give you at that point what is the acceleration. Then what is the purpose of acceleration time graph? It is to find the change in velocity is what you should remember. Now let us take the example here. What is the change in the velocity in the first 4 seconds, 0 to 4th second in this given case? It is 2 the height into first 4 seconds. So that is equal to 2 into 4 is equal to 8 meters per second. How will you get the units clear? 2 क्या है? Acceleration on the y-axis. इसका units क्या है? Meter per second square. 4 क्या है? X-axis के ऊपर time के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं. And time का unit क्या होता है? Seconds. So meter per second square into second is equal to meter per second. So that is the reason the change in the velocity from 0 to 4th second is calculated by putting up the acceleration time graph and calculating the area of this first 4 seconds. Now, 4th to 6th second, what is the change in velocity from 4th to 6th second? Fatafat bolo. Typically, this is a triangular area. So, on the x-axis, what is the change in time? Change in time is 2 seconds. And on the y-axis, what is the height on the y-axis? Already we said 2. So, it is 2 into 2 is equal to 4 meters per second is the change in the velocity from the 4th to 6th seconds. Now, फटाफट आप ही बोलना है अभी. What is the change in the velocity from 6th to 9th second? 6th to 9th second. So, from 6th to 9th second, what is the time? Change in time? It is 3 seconds. And what is the height of the y-axis? It is 3. 0, 0.5, 1, minus 1.5, minus 2, minus 2.5, minus 3. So, it is minus 3 meters per second square into 3 seconds will give you minus 9 meters per second is the change in the velocity from the 6th second to the 9th second. So, what is the whole purpose of acceleration time graph? Now, you understood? It talks about the change in the velocity. What is the final velocity at a given point of second? Let us say 6th second. And what is the velocity at the 4th second? It will be able to tell. Now, let us say the velocity at the starting point, 0 second. Let us assume that it is 1 meters per second. I ask you a question. Tell me, what is the velocity, looking at this graph, what is the velocity at fourth second? At the fourth second, suppose I asked you a question. So how will you answer this? It's very simple. Change in velocity is final velocity minus initial velocity. ये तो very simple है. So final velocity is equal to change in velocity plus इसको इधर लाओ initial velocity. My initial velocity कितना बोल दिया? Initial velocity is 1 meters per second at this point, right? And what is the change in velocity from the point 0 to the fourth second by the time you travel? What is the change in the velocity? We found that change in velocity from 0 to 4 is 8 meters per second. So यहाँ 8 लगाओ. 8 plus 1 कितना हो गया? 9 meters per second. So by the time it is fourth second, what is the velocity of this object? 9 meters per second is what you should remember. Now I ask you a question. What is the velocity? I ask you a question. What is the velocity at, let us say, 6th second? I ask you a question. So what will you answer? Once more, the same formula. Vf is equal to delta V plus V0. At the fourth second, what is your initial velocity? Already we calculated, no, 9. So if I want, what is the, let us unclutter the board, right? Unclutter the board. So I am asking you a question that what is the velocity? What is the velocity at 6th second? At 6th second. So already you know what is the velocity at 4th second. What is that? It is 9 meters per second. ये आ गया 9 meters per second. Plus, what is the change in velocity from 4th to 6th second? From 4th to 6th second already we calculated it is 4 meters per second. So 4 meters per second. So 4 plus 9 हो गया 13 meters per second is the velocity by the time you go on to the 6th second. Now my next question is, what is the velocity? What is the velocity at 9th second? 9th second I asked you a question. Next question. What is the velocity at 9th second is my next question. How will you answer? Very simple. Velocity at 9th second is change in velocity from 6th to 9th second plus what is the velocity at the 6th second. So change in velocity from 6th to 9th second कितना आ गया यहाँ? Minus 9 meters per second plus what is the velocity at 6th second? यहाँ कितना आ गया? 13 meters per second. So minus 9 plus 13 कितना हो गया? 4 meters per second is the velocity at the 9th second. So finally you should remember one simple statement for this entire story. What is that? Examiner is going to ask you in the tomorrow NEET UG exam, what is the purpose of acceleration time graph? The purpose is to know the change in velocity. Change in velocity to, if you want to know that over a period of time, then you need to plot acceleration on y-axis over time on the x-axis. That is what you should understand. So, enroll yourself, subscribe to the free physics classes on Pre-Medico app so that each concept, once you are very strong, over a period of time, you travel with me. Next 200 hours in physics, we will solve around 5,000 common questions asked in all last 20 years of medical entrance exams, AIMS, JIPMA, All India, NEET UG, etc., etc. And you become the champions in physics with Dr. Murali Bharadwaz. Thank you.